RotoGrinders. Welcome to RotoGrinders Today. I'm Jordan Cooper, a.k.a. BlenderHD. BlenderHD, if you want to follow me on Twitter. And it's Friday, October 13th. Oh, it's the Friday the 13th, the unluckiest day of the year. And we'll be talking about the NFL Week 6 Sunday slate on DraftKings. I guess we could touch on FanDuel. The pricing is a little bit different. GPP strategy, large field, small field, game stacks, team stacks, ownership, game theory, and everything in between. Hit that thumbs up button on your way in the door. You know, I like the thummy thumbs. Give me the thummy thumbs. Hit the subscribe button if you're new here. Hit the notification bell to know when we go live. It's Friday, so we got John Breslin, Scorer Patrol, GPP extraordinaire, the co-host of the Solo Ship show with JM to Win. That'll come out a little later today. Also, MMA stuff. You got NBA's coming back. I mean, you're all over the premium content here. So click on that link in the description. Get $10 off your first month and be able to take in the Squirrel Patrol's takes.
Yep.
I'm singing your praises. You're typically very, very humble. John, you're the only one when you're on crunch time for like MLB or NBA. Like I say this all the time, that like Roth has to bring up to you that you won $100,000 last night and you don't tell anyone.
Yeah. We've had shows where I've like won the morning slate while I'm on the show, and they're like you're not even watching this. But I kind of am on my phone when you see me like going like this, kind of looking down. That generally means I'm looking at something on my phone, which you'll see a lot of times, like at like 6:55 or whatever. You know, whenever. Like the MMA slate, 2 minutes beforehand, start like looking down. Is there anything overlaying? But glad to be here. We've got a kind of a weird NFL slate. It actually reminds me a little bit of an NBA slate because I think there's going to be a lot of injury news, and there's so much injury news floating around right now that like it wouldn't surprise me if there's like stuff still popping up around like 11 o'clock or noon on Sunday.
Also, it makes it a bit of a weird slate. The totals on this slate are low, or I mean, like we got, I mean, obviously that 49ers Browns game with PJ Walker starting at quarterback. I mean, that's like a 35.5 total. I mean, when you're looking at a 47.5 total as like, oh, juicy, this is the juicy game of the week. We'll be talking about game stacks and team stacks and games to target, games that may be overowned, underowned. Your general approach on a slate where the totals are lower, are you more or less inclined? They're basically two kind of opposite sides of thought, right? Strategically, on a low total slate with a lot of low totals, some people would say, well, the chances of any of the games like shooting out is much lower, so I'm less inclined. I'm looking for the best pieces, right? I'm less inclined to build these like 5-man, 6-man game stacks or something overboard onslaughts. And then you have the other side of the spectrum of, well, with so many games that are unlikely to shoot out, if one of them does, it'll overperform like almost every other game. So it's almost you're more willing to just take a shot on a game. Which side of the spectrum you tend to be on?
I'm way more on the latter side. That when you've got a bunch of games that are like clumped together, and it reminds me of baseball, right? Like, because sometimes you have Coors Field slates, and it's like, oh, this team's got like an 8 implied run total. Everybody's just going to stack this team. But like you have the non-Coors Field slates where like, oh, everybody's got like an implied run total of like 4.5. Like, how can we possibly stack? Oh, this is a great slate not to stack. Like, no, that's a great slate to stack because one of those games is going to go way past its total. And you've got a lot of people that are like not stacking on the slate because when you run like the optimal lineups, you're getting like one hitter from each team. Or like if you run optimal lineups, like for this NFL slate, you may get a bunch of like players from different games, different teams because everything's got about the same like total. But like no, like one of these games is going to go way over its total. So like that's the game you're trying to capture. The difficult thing is finding out which game that is. Although I will say that, like, in some ways, this is a little bit of like a mixed Coors Field slate because, like, I look at like implied point totals more than game totals, I'd say. And the Dolphins are like crushing everybody. Like they're the only ones with 30.
So let's talk about that. If anyone has any questions, feel free to post them in the YouTube chat. Obviously, hit that thumbs up button, hit the like button. So let's start off. I have the the current RotoGrinders NFL projections, as well as ownership loaded into Lineup HQ. You could obviously get this if you're a premium member. And let's start off. Let's start off with Miami. I ran lineups this morning. So basically, I ran 300 lineups. With the whole mess of different quarterbacks and different stacks and everything, just to see, like, from the mean perspective, not the ceiling, but just the mean perspective, what are the higher projected lineups, and then compared it also to ownership. So it's a matter of, okay, high projection, high ownership, high projection, low ownership, low projection, low ownership, stuff like that. In the runs that I've had, uh, the Miami game, I get a lot of Mostert, right? I get a lot of Tyreek Hill as a one-off, but I really don't get a lot of Tua stacks. From a ceiling perspective, do you think that we have Mostert's ownership at 13.99? I think that's going to end up being higher. He's 6,400. I know, like, Jeff Wilson may come off the IR, and his projection will obviously go up if Wilson isn't active. Do you think that, from a mean perspective, like, Tua doesn't look great, but the Dolphins have such a higher implied total than so many teams? Are you willing to take a shot on, like, a Tua plus Hill or Tua plus Waddle type of stack, even though the mean projection may be just slightly lower than other lineups?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm actually the yellow dot there that's got Jeff Wilson tagged. Because I think that's going to be an interesting thing. We'll get like Friday practice reports come out generally, Friday afternoon. And we'll see if there's any like any verbiage about how he's going to be used. Was he practicing, stuff like that. But I think Wilson's kind of a sneaky play. So there's an NFL season that haunts me. It's the 2019 NFL season. I've talked about this like sometimes on shows before. That was the season where you had like Lamar Jackson just like broke out and like just started crushing slates. Christian McCaffrey like started the year priced at like 8,000, and then like he was putting up like 40 points a game for Carolina, and then Michael Thomas like absolutely broke the wide receiver position. And like when you were doing content that year, it was really difficult because like you're trying to like name your like top 4 quarterbacks, top 3 running backs, or whatever. But it was like, no, you just play like Lamar Jackson, Christian McCaffrey, and Michael Thomas every slate, just lock button them. Like you would have been much better at the end of the year having done that and just try to find anybody else to like fill in that lineup. And you would have done like much better than like trying to pick, those guys are too expensive, so I'm going to try to figure something else out. I think this year might be like that, but with like the Miami Dolphins, where we're like, at the end of the year, you're going to look back and just say, well, I should have just played 150 Dolphin stacks every single week. And that you would have been more profitable than like looking at the dynamics of that particular week and like figuring out the injury situations for that particular week. Like maybe we should just all play Dolphins the rest of the year. Because I think what they're doing is like transformative in the NFL, like in terms of offense. It's different than like what other people have seen before. Like maybe we should just all be playing Dolphins.
Because they're kind of playing. I mean, it feels like when I see their games on Red Zone, that it feels like college football games. I mean, I've been doing college football props the past 3 weeks with sports betting open in Kentucky, and I take a look at like the dynamics of how these teams play. Now, obviously, they play with kind of different formations. They have option offenses, but it's like the ability for one team to get down the field in like 58 seconds is so much more prevalent in college football than it is in the NFL. So when I feel like I'm watching Dolphins games, I feel like, oh, they got the ball on their own 25-yard line. They could score in a minute from anywhere on the field, and they may do that 2 or 3 times a game. And those big plays are just like DFS gold because you get all those points, and it's very likely that they're also not much time has come off the clock, and they're going to get the ball back.
Yeah. And so like I don't know a ton about college football, but I've always gotten the impression that there was like lopsided scores are basically due to physical mismatches, right? Like you have one team that's basically all NFL players, going to be all NFL players next year, and they're playing like my alma maters or whatever, and it's just a bunch of regular guys and they're just running up and down the field, right? But that's the Dolphins. They're like, they've got these like incredible physical mismatches in the NFL. Like they have some of the fastest people in the world just on their football team, just running down the field. Like, what do you like? Well, nobody can catch them, And I think like NFL teams have like been building these like offenses where like, okay, we're gonna have the really fast guy, but we also want to have the big bodied wide receiver that, is an end zone mismatch, red zone mismatch. And we want to have, the running back that's like this. But like the Dolphins are just like, no, we're just going to get the fastest human beings in the world. We're going to give them the football and they're going to run past everybody. And I don't think like the NFL knows how to adjust to that.
Well, let's talk about another game I have on my list in running lineups. This came up high in projection. I think the ownership will kind of come with it as well. It's the second highest team total on the slate, and that's the Cardinals Rams game. I have both sides of the game. So in running lineups, even comparing with ownership, I got Stafford stacks. I also have Dobbs stacks, and the Dobbs stack is what we talked about the past couple of weeks. Dobbs plus Marquise Brown plus Zach Ertz. And on the Stafford side, it's a little bit more expensive, but I'm not sure if you're necessarily playing a 9K Cup and 8K Puka Nacua together. It seems to me it's like a very similar dynamic to the Dolphins with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, right? With like they're both really priced up, and you'd rather just one guy shatter the slate. I don't mind mixing in a 4K Higbee, but what are your thoughts on the game stack? I mean, you could do a Dobbs stack and run it back with Kyron Williams, even at 6,500. We even have like Amari DeMarcado with Connor out on the IR at 4,900, and he can catch a couple of balls out of the backfield as well. So we have the, I always love playing running backs that are like under 5,500, under 5K that have, pass catching upside. I mean, Arizona has a 20.75 implied team total. I mean, for the context of the slate, that isn't the lowest of the low. Obviously, the Dolphins are the Dolphins, but the Rams typically play fast. The Cardinals don't look horrible. What's your dynamic? Are you more likely or less likely to play this game?
Yeah, that's a difficult decision. I think whether you want to be overweight or underweight this game, I think this game might have like the highest cumulative ownership, I think, on the slate. Like I think the Rams are going to be very, very popular. Because like I said, last talk about Miami, and like we get fantasy points for like running up and down the field, getting yardage and touchdowns. We also get fantasy points for receptions. And like the Rams are like piling receptions. Cooper Kupp and Puka. And then you have Tutu that's would occasionally get a long touchdown. And then they have like a concentrated backfield in Kyron Williams. He's maybe not getting as much passing work as he was earlier in the season. But I think if Kyron Williams ends up with like 3 touchdowns or something, or 2 touchdowns, like that's definitely possible because they're giving him so much work out of the backfield. And that would be taking away from Cooper Kupp, who I think is going to be one of the higher owned guys on the slate. It's difficult. I feel like this might be a better game for cash games, if that makes sense. And like Marquise Brown, I think is well priced, but I think people are starting to catch on to Arizona being better than we expected. And I think the backfield, they're going to have a low priced running back or maybe 2 low priced running backs. Like I think they're going to be pretty highly owned as well. So it's not a game that I can say a lot of bad things about, but it's also a game that I think might see very, very high ownership. And I do want to see
basically your concern is that at the ownership, you may actually get points out of all these players that you're not upset with, but your concern is that in the ceiling of if Cooper Kupp puts up 27 points at 9K, that's I mean, it's a lot of points, but it's fadeable. If Kyron Williams puts up 18 points, you're fine with it. It could be in the winning GPP lineup. Marquise Brown could put up 18 points, or Puka could put up 20 points, and Zach Ertz could have his 11 points. You just feel that these guys are much more likely to hit their means, but it may not be the game where it's it's fine to have, but you're not sure how many there won't be many snowflakes, but there may not be many flame emojis.
Yeah, exactly. Cooper Kupp needs a lot of points to pay off that salary. So he might put up an amount of points that doesn't kill you if you're finding a lot of points from the lower priced guys on your roster. But he's not necessarily going to win you a tournament either because he's taking up a lot of salary. So I kind of have a neutral stance on this game. I might, if it sees kind of outsized ownership, I might end up under the field. I'm not gonna aim to be under the field on this game. It's just I think it could see very high ownership, and I don't really know how to parse out the running back situation because I think they have Emery, DeMarcado.
Mercado, they have Keontae Ingram also.
Yeah. So we kind of got to see how that shakes out, and that strikes me as one of the situations where we really don't have any idea, and it could all indications could be it's going to be one guy leading into game time, and the game starts, and the other guy's getting all the carries, and like both guys are really cheap, so like if one of them ends up getting all the work, that could be a slate breaker. But we just have no idea how it's going to shake out, and even with the coach speak or whatever isn't something I'm necessarily going to trust.
Okay, so what games? What is the game that you are targeting?
So, I mean, beyond the Miami game, we have some weather situations on the slate. So it looks like there could be some pretty high wind, particularly in the Midwest. I think like Chicago and the Chicago, Minnesota, and Cleveland, San Francisco game. Like, not that Cleveland was necessarily going to do a lot anyway, but I think the total in the Miami Chicago game has been dropping.
Yeah, the Minnesota Chicago game, I think, opened at 47.5 or even 48.5. It's now down to 43.5. This game is going to have some chalkier pieces in it because Justin Jefferson is out. The running back situation for Chicago, I mean, Roschon Johnson is in the concussion protocol. And as I've said multiple weeks, we have not yet seen a player enter the concussion protocol and still play the following week. So we have Roschon Johnson in the projections currently as questionable, but they re-signed Deonta Foreman, and like Travis Homer is banged up. I mean, like Blasingame is really a fullback, so it's like he's not really a runner. Especially, I mean, regardless, if Roschon Johnson doesn't play, Deonta Foreman will get some ownership. And if he does play, Roschon Johnson will get ownership. We got Addison and Osborne. They're going to be owned, right? DJ Moore's coming off of a huge game. People want to play TJ Hawkinson at 6,600, and he's very expensive at tight end. To me, this is the game because the total keeps on coming down. I think people look at Fields and they go upside, 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 right? You just do the Fields more Komet route, like typical. And then people look and go, well, Addison and Osborne are cheap. Why don't I just play Kirk Cousins? I almost feel like the ownership of this game ends up fairly similar to the Rams-Cardinals game. But do you see otherwise? Do you think that the pricing of this game, like while in the other game you have $9K Cup and $6,500 Kyron Williams and stuff like that, that you're fine eating a little bit of the ownership here because look how cheap these guys are.
I'm probably going to be under the field on this game. I hope
so you're not targeting. I was under the impression that it's like, oh, here's the game to target, and then you're like, yeah, here's the game, and I'm not targeting it. But I mean,
yeah, no, sorry.
Do you agree with me the fact that you think it's going to be overowned?
Yeah, I think it'll be overowned. I have like almost no interest in Chicago Bears running backs this year. Like Justin Fields just doesn't pass for the running back, and he gets the rushing yards instead of the running backs. Like I'm trying to think of the last time I was sorry I didn't play a Chicago Bears running back. And Foreman, yeah, I agree. I think Foreman might end up being the guy like last man standing in the backfield, and he's 6,000 on FanDuel. Like that's higher priced than like a lot of running backs that have been starting all year and should get ample opportunity. And he's cheaper on DraftKings, but on DraftKings we might have other cheap running backs that are in a better spot. I think if the weather concerns and wind concerns end up coming into play, I think I'll be very under the field on this game. I don't know that I really want to be playing like Jordan Addison and KJ Osborne when there's no Justin Jefferson, and now they're going to be like the focus of the defense. Addison would probably be the guy I'm like more leaning towards, but actually, like probably TJ Hawkinson would be the guy I'm most interested in because he fills that like bleak tight end position. But if there's wind and this game's going to see a high ownership, like I'll easily go anywhere else.
Okay, so how about a game that? Well, let me clarify that you are targeting.
I think maybe the New Orleans Houston game. I think that's got some underpriced pieces. I like the idea of playing. I think Alvin Kamara will be popular, but I think he's going to get some receptions, and he's the main guy in the backfield in New Orleans. Houston, has a run defense that you can score some points on. I think like the Houston wide receivers as bringbacks have been too cheap all season, like Nico Collins, Robert Woods. Like I think I put Robert Woods as a tag, he's really just a value tag. Like he's way too cheap on both sites. And I don't usually like tag guys like that, but we might not have like a bunch of cheap wide receivers this week like we did last week, and so like Robert Woods might end up being a guy I play a lot of. And then Damian Pierce also is kind of getting forgotten about, but there's no real reason for him to be forgotten about. He's playing as the home running back. So yeah, I think this is a game that I'm going to end up with some pieces of, and I'll end up with some game stacks, but I'll end up with some of these guys as like value one-offs as well.
Are you more likely to stack this from the Carr side or from the Stroud side?
It's tough because Carr hasn't really looked that good.
I mean, the issue with Carr is that Taysom Hill comes in and ruins everything, and also with Tank Dell out, I mean, I think that the receiving core for the Texans are a little bit more condensed. That playing, I know he's dusty, but Robert Woods is only 3,800. Nico Collins is 5,600. I mean, I don't mind doing a Stroud and those two plus Kamara as the run back type of thing. I mean, this is not a game that I'm targeting. It's not on my list, but I mean, for the prices, I can't. And you could always play Olave as a one-off. I mean, he could score a touchdown or two and 100+ yards. But I'm always concerned about Carr plus Thomas plus Olave or Shaheed. Just that dude. And red zone comes on and they're on the 22-yard line, and then you see number 7 behind center, and you go, why do I have Derek Carr in my quarterback? Like, what's his ceiling if in a lot of pivotal situations he comes out?
Right. I think I'm more interested in Stroud as the quarterback, but this is maybe more of a game where I'll be overweight the secondary stacks than I'm going to play the traditional quarterback, 2 wide receivers and a run back game. Right. It's but I will have a lot of I think I'll be over the field on this game. I don't know if it'll be in a traditional stack where I've got 5 pieces from this game.
Okay, you want to know one of the games that I'm targeting as of right now? Okay. It's a game that I think the range of outcomes for this game is very wide. It could be really bad. It could be really good. And it's primarily because you don't know what you're going to get with both of these quarterbacks. And that's the Commanders and the Falcons. Sam Howell and Desmond Ridder. You got big play guys in this game, right? You got Bijan Robinson. I think his ownership is going to be fairly low at 7,200, right? You got Kyle Pitts at 3,500. You got Drake London at 4,800. You could always play Desmond Ridder like that. Then on the Howell side, you got Logan Thomas at 3,500, Terry McLaurin at 5,500, Jahan Dotson at 4,700, Curtis Samuel at 3,700. These are 2 young, bad quarterbacks, right? It can be very sloppy, but sloppy in a good way of Falcons could score on any snap of the game. Of course, they're much more known for running the ball and slowing the game down because they just run so much. But if the Commanders, we may see a type of game where there's multiple turnovers and short fields, that I wouldn't be shocked if this game went way over its 42.5 total, simply not because of 3. Yeah, if it's 3 and out punt, yeah, it's a horrible game, right? But it's Howell throws first play of the game. Howell throws an interception. Falcons score. Commanders there's a 68-yard touchdown to Terry McLaurin, and now the Falcons get the ball back. Bijan Robinson runs for 42 yards. There are people in this game that are big play people. It's just getting the right game script in a Falcons game. We saw that last week. You get the right game script. The Falcons are very DFS friendly. People tend to shy away from it. I think especially on this slate, even with the recency bias from last week, I think people are just going to be like, yeah, screw the Falcons, screw Falcons games. I can't trust Ritter. I can't trust Howell. But at these prices and this ownership, I feel compelled to have it to take a shot on this.
I was thinking about this game earlier, and my primary interest in like a correlation from this game is Bijan Robinson and the Falcons defense, because I think Bijan and the Falcons defense might both be underowned, and the Commanders giving up a ton of sacks. Like I feel like the Commanders season, and it's tough because like they're my local team, so I see stuff in local news about
But how bad they are.
Was that?
How you see how bad they really are.
Yeah, exactly. And like they might be a team that implodes. Like they've got new ownership. Like I think Ron Rivera might be on his way out as coach. They got Eric Bieniemy as the offensive coordinator. Like if this team like implodes, it might be like, oh, okay, yeah, we're just gonna like have Eric Bieniemy be the coach next year or even this year.
I mean, that's what truthfully, that's what they should do.
Yeah, exactly. So and that like Rivera is a holdover from the old ownership group. So, I mean, that's just total wild speculation. But like, I could see this being a team that kind of implodes. Like they got like nothing out of their draft class this year, which I think was primarily on defense. They can't play any of the guys. The pass defense like is not acceptable. I think Atlanta. I'm way more interested in the Atlanta side here, playing at home, and I do agree it's a game that could go over its total. They're in the dome, and Atlanta's got like they're going to constantly do these run plays, but when the run play goes for like 50 yards and scores a touchdown, then that's the way, and they have the players that have that ability, right? Then suddenly this is a game that can go over its total. I just don't know how interested I am in the Washington side in terms of creating a game stack.
But you can see how messy the game could be.
Yeah, definitely.
It
but
can
like
be messy good, it can be messy bad. I mean, but just
Yeah.
understand you're taking the risk that a lot of times it's messy bad.
Yeah, and I think like Drake London is too good of a receiver to be so cheap. But he could also get no targets and no receptions, right? Like if the Falcons if the Falcons can just run the ball, they probably will. So like that. So I will in my 150 set, I'll absolutely I'll have some Desmond Ritter, like Drake London, Kyle Pitts, kind of Jonnu Smith or whatever kind of stacks. And some of those will have Washington like run backs, maybe like a Curtis Samuel or Logan Thomas. But yeah, my primary interest in this game is like a Bijan Robinson Falcons defense stack.
What's your interest in Burrow stacks into ownership? Because we have Jamar Chase as one of the highest owned wide receivers, and Mixon is one of the highest owned running backs. Are you into a Burrow stack, or is a more different way to play Chase to play the Geno on the other side? I mean, I don't have Geno coming up all that much in my runs. If anything, I would kind of play a Geno Lockett fan type of lineup. But T. Higgins looks like he may play this week. I know I've talked about it on Wednesday with TJ. Sometimes we've seen Higgins be active and then not even play. Right? Last year, I think Higgins was active, played 3 snaps, and that's it. Are you concerned? Recency bias, obviously, 55 points last week. Squeaky wheel narrative. Mixon is not necessarily the most efficient runner. He'll touch the ball a lot, but a lot of times Mixon does not burn you by not playing him. Burrow is probably, I mean, we have Burrow as like the 3rd highest owned quarterback. Do you think the Bengals stack is overowned, or do you think it's worth it?
I think it could be overowned. It's a scary fade, like as we saw last week. But I think just based off of last week, I think they'll be overowned. And some of it does depend on like what we get out of it. Like, so that's part of the injury news on the slate. Like, is T. Higgins going to play? Actually, I hadn't really thought that much about the Geno Smith, Jamar Chase stack, and that is actually something that's interesting to me. Because I think you will see a lot of like Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, but like maybe that should just be Jamar Chase as a one-off, and then anything else. And so maybe I'd be interested. Like, yeah, actually, you kind of bring up a good point that if Geno was connecting with his wide receivers, then that's probably like raising the ceiling on Jamar Chase. So maybe that's a better way to approach this game. That's going to see far less ownership. And I do have some interest in like Kenneth Walker as well. He's like Walker is a guy that like I never want to play at high ownership. Like sometimes he ends up being the chalk running back, and I'm not sure that's justified. But like he does have the ability to break a slate, as we've seen. Like he's a guy that can break off those long runs that nobody can catch up to. So yeah, maybe that's some interesting correlations in this game that are going to be not played as high as they should be, because I do think Jamar Chase and Joe Mixon are both going to see pretty high ownership.
Another game I want to talk about because I think one of the quarterbacks is maybe popular in cash games. I think one of the receivers may be popular in cash games. But I want to get your thoughts on the ceiling potential is the Colts Jaguars game. Richardson is going to be out for a while. Gardner Minshew is in. He's 5K. Josh Downs is 4,100. And we see his snaps are increasing. He's playing in the slot. He's obviously now playing with a quarterback that's much more likely to pass the ball than rush the ball. So the passing volume should go up. These Jaguars receivers, I mean, Jaguars have a 24.5 implied team total, which is nothing to, for this slate is in the higher half. Do you think mean projections would have you jamming in Minshew Downs singles? Maybe a Pittman, maybe a Granson in there. But when I run it with like ownership involved, I get more Lawrence stacks because the ceilings of guys like Ridley and Kirk and even Ingram at tight end, Zay Jones, I mean, I know he's questionable. Like, I almost feel like the floor is on the Colts side, but the ceiling is like, if this game shoots out, you'd rather have the Jaguars than the Colts.
Yeah, I think so. I'm interested in this game. I'm surprised. I thought this game was seeing like a little bit higher ownership, and I think this game might be higher owned than we're seeing with these numbers. But I'll probably be at these numbers or a bit higher, and then just I'll just see what ownership is. But I think Christian Kirk is really underpriced, and I think he's going to see some ownership. And actually, I kind of like Calvin Ridley because I think Ridley is a guy that's maybe more likely to break a slate, and I think like Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, and Etienne are going to see the ownership. And like, what if it's a Calvin Ridley game? And I think Zay Jones is still questionable, like still legitimately questionable. So we'll see how that shakes out as well. Because like if he misses the game, then I think that adds a little bit, more interest to every piece on the Jacksonville side. But yeah, I mean, I think you could play this game either way. I mean, Minshew is probably pretty cheap, and he's probably not going to project that well. Like I don't think he'll be that highly owned. So yeah, I guess this is probably a game that like if this game ends up being low owned, like then I'll end up being over the field on it.
Now we get to, you want to know my favorite game stack? My favorite stack. It may not be a game stack, but my favorite stack of the week compared to ownership. It's going to be that people may not like it, right? It's not, but the thing is, it's not a vomit stack.
Okay.
And that's the Las Vegas Raiders.
Oh, that's
I love your reaction.
You said it was not a vomit stack,
right? But it's only because of price. It can't be a vomit stack.
Okay.
Josh Jacobs is going to get ownership. I mean, the Raiders don't look good, but the Patriots look even worse, right? So Josh Jacobs is going to get. I mean, he may not be one of the higher owned running backs, but probably be in the top 5. He's 7K. Jimmy G plus Adams. I mean, the thing that I love about the Raiders, good or bad, is that you kind of know where the ball goes. Like, it's kind of like Jacobs, Adams, Myers, and like, okay, is there a need for anyone else? Adams is 8,100. That the ownership for Chase and Kupp and Tyreek and all those guys, like, he's going to be, 8,100. People aren't going to pay for Devontae Adams. 5,800 for Myers. I mean, you got Kirk there. You got Marquise Brown in that range. Like, I think Jacobs is going to be the highest owned out of this game. All the Patriots receivers are cheap. Ramondre is 5,400. I'm not saying to play Ramondre Stevenson. I'm not even saying to play the Patriots. It's just that it's quite possible this Patriots team, like Mac Jones is so bad that he throws 3, he gets benched by the half, and Zappy's in there, and the Raiders, no matter how bad they've looked, like they just truck him for 30 plus points. And it just, who else does it go to other than these 3 guys? So why aren't they playing like Garoppolo, Adams, Myers, even with no bring back in at least some lineups? Because it's just like I don't have to guess on this team, and they're playing at home as a favorite with a 22 implied total on a slate that many of these teams don't even have high totals. Am I convincing you, John?
No, I mean, yeah. So the Raiders always like end up in optimal lineups because they have a very concentrated offense. Like Josh Jacobs is like one of the true workhorse running backs left. Like Devontae Adams sees a ton of volume, and like Jacoby Myers is getting involved too. And it's basically those 3. These teams have been both teams have been such disappointments here, and there's a wide range of outcomes for this game. I agree. Like maybe the Patriots don't look so bad, and if the Patriots don't look so bad, then maybe that pushes the Raiders a little bit. I definitely like the Raiders side more. Like if I play a Patriot, it's probably going to be Ramondre Stevenson. But I can't really argue against playing guys from this game because, like, yeah, if Josh Jacobs scored 2 touchdowns, like that kind of breaks the slate a little bit. That's definitely within the realm of possibility. Devontae Adams gets like 12 receptions, 120 yards and a touchdown. Like definitely within the realm of possibility. I just don't feel great about anybody from this game. I don't know. Jacobs would probably be my favorite from the Raiders side. We'll see. I think how much Josh Jacobs I own will be dependent a little bit on how much value we get at running back. Like I'd probably rather pay down for a value running back and spend up at wide receiver. But if we don't get that value from the running back position, then Josh Jacobs is a fine choice at running back.
I want to point out, if you're a premium member, you get our DFS optimal stacks tool for both DraftKings and FanDuel. Jamino has posted up the initial run already. So click on that link in the description. Get $10 off your first month. Combo premium, you get everything. Join our Discord, right? You don't get access to the premium channels, but you get access to most of the channels. So go to rotogrinders.com/Discord. And the cover boy of the optimal stacks tool is a quarterback we have not talked about, and that's Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles, who have a 24 implied total. The issue projection-wise with the Eagles is that, like, Swift is going to get ownership. Like, the running backs in this game may get ownership, but, like, the other pieces of this game, from a mean standpoint, are kind of overpriced. I mean, yeah, sure, A.J. Brown has a ceiling. Sure, Devonta Smith, 7K, has a ceiling. Sure, Garrett Wilson has a ceiling. Sure, Dallas Goedert at 4,800 has a ceiling. But, Hurts is the most expensive quarterback on the slate on a low-scoring type of slate. And if you jam in, Hurts plus Brown plus Wilson, I mean, your mean projection starts going down, down, down. But would you be shocked if the Eagles, I mean, I'm never shocked when the Eagles score 30 plus points. So according to the optimal stacks tool, how interested are you in Jalen Hurts in this game?
So we're showing Jalen Hurts with like pretty good ownership, and I think it'll be a little bit less because like 24 points, I think, is their implied point total. That's pretty low for the Eagles, and they're priced up as though it should be much higher. But like I agree, like I don't think they're going to see a lot of ownership here. Like I think they're going to see even less ownership than we're projecting, but because of Jalen Hurts' price. But yeah, I mean, if he goes really low owned, I want to be over the field because you see these games all the time where the team's got a lower implied point total. It's like not the best matchup for them, but like the Eagles can like kind of stomp anybody. So I mean, I don't want to like go out of my way to pick up on the Jets defense. But if this game, like if Jalen Hurts is going to see like 5% ownership, like I want to be well over the field on that.
I want to point out that if you're not only playing DFS, but you could also play props and pick'em, right? Pick'em is like prize picks, underdog, obviously props on the regular regulated legal sports books like DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, Caesars, wherever you get, remember, line shop. Go to scoresandodds.com. Make sure you get, if you're going to take a prop, get the best number, get the best price. But we do have a props and pick 'em package here that if you're a premium member, you get this, right? But if you just want the props and pick 'em stuff, we have a separate, smaller package just for you. And we have all of our analysts, many of our analysts that post their bets, their plays, their pick'ems, their stuff like that here throughout the course of the week. Obviously, you want to get the best number, get the best price. The other thing we have is that remember, we do DFS projections, right? The one thing about prop betting that people, if you just play DFS, you don't understand is that, like, when you have DFS projections, you have prop projections. We have statistical projections available in numerous sports here at RotoGrinders. So you could sign up for RotoGrinders Premium. Dude, John, on Wednesday, I played a Prize Picks card for college football. The games were like UTEP versus Eastern Tennessee and Sam Houston versus, like, I don't know who these people are. And I just looked at our projections that day, and I found 4 that were significantly, minus 120 or better. And then I paired that with like Isaiah Pacheco under for the Thursday night game, 5 for 5, right? I do that in NHL. The NHL just started. I just go to our projections for NHL in the middle of the day, and I just hammer anything out that shows an edge. And we have the Scores and Auto prop model top 20. And you could go here. You always look at the time. One thing I like is that we always have timestamps on when things are posted, when things are updated. But you could go to NHL, NBA, MLB, PGA, and based on our RotoGrinders projections, you could see, what the line is at a certain book, right? What our win percentage is based on that range of outcomes. And you could go and say, oh, okay, based on these projections, that should be a positive edge, positive EV wager. And another thing you could do, if you're a little bit more advanced, you could go to any of our projection tables and download it as a CSV. So I bring in all these projections that we have, the blitz projections with Cardi, the bat projections that he has. I bring them into Excel, and I could look at stuff that way. I could aggregate multiple projections together and then compare them to the sports books, compare them to the Prize Picks and Underdog. And like, dude, it's truthfully, John, it's better than cash games.
Yeah. No, that was like one of the nicest surprises when Virginia legalized sports betting. Because I was never really into sports betting before that. And I thought like, well, if you want to, and I started, researching it. It's like, oh, if you really want to beat sports betting, you've got to have these like advanced statistical models. Like, oh, that sounds like a lot of work, right? And then I started downloading my projections for DFS. It's like, oh, wait a second, I have like advanced statistical models like right here that I can use. And I will say, like, yeah, you can see sometimes there's a sizable difference between the projections and the sports book, lines or the player props or whatever. But those differences don't always last long, because oftentimes the sports book player prop ends up creeping up or creeping down to meet the advanced statistical projections. So something
right, because other people have similar projections, or they're looking at this, or they're also looking at very similar stuff. So understand that DFS and prop betting and pick'em betting and pick'em and projecting, or whatever you want to call it, that's something that you do earlier, and DFS is something you do later. And many people kind of do it the opposite way. They go, I'm going to wake up in the morning and think about my DFS lineups. And then when 6:30 comes around for an NBA slate, NBA is a little bit different because of all the injury stuff. But let's say NHL or college football or NFL, it's Sunday morning at 11 a.m. and they're like, oh, now, like, what props do you like? It's like, dude, there's nothing worth. You should have taken this on Tuesday or Wednesday. It's like, no. When you wake up in the morning, the first thing you should be thinking about is, let me take a look at the sports books. Let me take a look at Prize Picks. Let me take a look at Underdog. Let me compare these initial projections to that. You don't have to do, there's no strategy. There's no ownership. There's just, here's the number. What's the range of outcomes? What's the distribution? What's the median? We have all the projections. Oh, okay. This looks like a positive EV bet. Take it. And then you're done. Like, there's no, like, you have to edit your lineups or anything. And then once it gets to 5, 6 o'clock and it's MLB or NBA, that's when you're doing your DFS lineups, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of the opposite.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And like we were even talking about the Chicago Minnesota total like dropping like 4 or 5 points or whatever. Like that's a huge drop. Like weather is something you can get, some kind of advanced, insight into and then place your bets accordingly. Like that's a big drop for a game. And I think a lot of that is due to weather. So that's something to keep in mind as well. If you can get good weather forecasts, which we have, then something you can place some bets on.
Right. We also have you see the flashing on the banner Fantasy Sync. So with like scores and odds in the Action Network, you could sync your Prize Picks account, your Underdog account. You could sync your sportsbook accounts because hey, just like Score Patrol, we do in DFS. We always track our results, right? We're always looking. What are we good at? What are we not good at? Where are our weaknesses? What field sizes? What entry points and everything like that. That's one thing you definitely want to do with props and pick 'em and track it over a long period of time. Like NHL just started. I'm not weeding through the past 2.5 days of NHL props, but like after a month, I will go through and go, yeah, it seems like I'm it's the shots on goal unders are not as attractive as they seem to be. So I'm gonna kind of lower it, but the over points ones seem to be much more off. So I'd be much more inclined to look at those markets versus others. So you can kind of glean stuff just like you could in DFS, right? When you look at something like Roto Tracker, right? You could see it's like, oh, here's my past year of NBA play. Like, where have I done well and where have I not, and where are the edges?
Yeah, I think that's actually huge. That should maybe be the start of the show, or what, or not the end, but like tracking your results and like figuring out where you have a sustained edge is gigantic because that like getting that sustained edge, even if it's not necessarily like in super high upside contests, like once you start like building bankroll on contests, whether it's DFS contests, certain kinds of sports betting or player prop betting or whatever, once you start like building the bankroll that way, then suddenly you have the funds to like be entering these super high, top heavy, like millionaire maker contests, where you might have an edge, but it just takes you a lot longer to realize it. Like tracking your results, figuring out where you have an edge is actually like absolutely critical to everything that we do and talk about.
So, John, you have a solo ship coming out later today. And you have you'll be on Crunch Time tomorrow for MMA
Yeah.
as well. We got an MMA card. You'll also have your. I love the graphic, the hitting the nuts. I like, you can't tell, but those nuts in your glass have been photoshopped in.
Yeah, it took me weeks to realize that. Like, oh, there's like pistachios or something in my champagne glass. Yeah, no, that's a brilliant like little touch by the marketing team. I don't know if squirrels actually eat pistachios or whatever is in that glass, but it's okay. The whole Squirrel Patrol thing was actually named after my dogs anyway, so it's fine. Like squirrel is not even the symbol, but that's fine. It's come together with a photoshopped picture of me with a champagne glass with a bunch of pistachios in it. Yeah, it works.
And you're also on the Sunday block at around 11 a.m. Right, we do a whole like 3.5 hour block of shows, free shows here on YouTube for the Sunday morning, and you and Eric come on in the middle. It's typically Dean and the gang early, then you and Eric talk about tournament stuff in the middle, and then we got crunch time half an hour before lock. So people should when they do wake up in the morning and start building their DFS lineups, they should definitely tune into you and Eric talk about galaxy branding yourself out of not playing just all Dolphin stacks.
Yeah, it is one of my favorite shows. Like, because Eric and I just got done. We used to do a show like back in the day, on like live qualifiers. But it is we just kind of sit there and talk about like ways to get off of the chalk for better or for worse. And sometimes it really works out. So, yeah, I love that 11 a.m. show, and it goes nicely to like 12:15, and then you have like kind of the crunch time like breaking news team that gets on and leads you right into lock.
So you could check that out here on the YouTube channel. Subscribe if you're new here. Hit that notification bell. You'll always know when we go live. right? We'll have NBA stuff coming back, right? We still have MLB playoffs. We got college football content coming out, MMA ground and pound podcast for the premium members. We got all the tools, all the data, right? You get lineup HQ, you get the player projections, the ownership, you get all the stack tools and everything. So click on that link in the description, get $10 off your first month. Join us in the Discord. That's free, except for my channel. You have to be a premium member. RotoGrinders.com/Discord. Send in your questions to the show. Anything about DFS strategy, props, pick 'em, anything. Questions at theoryofdfs.com. They go directly to me, and I answer them here because that's what I do. 11 o'clock Eastern, Monday through Friday. Everything you're thinking about when it comes to daily fantasy, props, and pick 'em on RotoGrinders Today.